to this computer. All right. I hope I'm recording. I think I'm recording. Hi. Guess who just had the ability to start doing his videos after the construction outside? It's this guy. Delay in the agenda. Sorry. But it's still good. You got this long weekend, hopefully, to watch this video and so forth. What we're going to do today, this is for second to last week of online content for the short course, because we have one more week of online content and then finals week, which will be the final on Tuesday, any time that you want to take it online. And then Thursday, we meet one last time during the class time for your final speech. We're almost done. That was a very short course. So let's get started. Oh, I put a water cup, mostly the carbonated water in there that's mostly uncarbonated. Oh well, I don't want to waste. All right, anyways, so what we're doing right now is we're going to be covering your last speech, of course, which I already queued you up a bit, and so forth, and that is your persuasion speech. So we're going to get the technical stuff out of the way first, and then we're going to cover what it is. First off, 6-minute speech. So you're going to have to speak longer, which is actually not that hard because persuasion usually takes long. It always takes longer, actually. So it's a longer speech. All right. Outline's still the same. Outline's still the same. 15 minutes. You have your evaluation, which is 15 minutes. I'm sorry. I messed up. 15 points. And then your evaluation is 10 points, same as last time, except the questions are different. And then the presentation points are the same, 75. What a semester. What you're going to do is your persuasion is you're going to present a problem solution speech about an issue. Now, it has to be a change. So we're talking a social issue. Remember, your first speech was about you. So nothing about you, and nothing about what your future job is. Can't be connected to that. Your second speech was something that you're going to informative about. You're talking about a thing and you're informing it about it. Could have been a hobby, whatever. Your second speech and third speech can't be related, right? Now you're using those two things to convince people to make a change in our society with your solution, right? And it has to be a change. So you can't come up and say, well, I want to do an anti-DUI speech. We have a lot of DUI laws already, pretty strong ones as well. There was a movement called MAD years and years ago that started the ball, and we actually have pretty aggressive laws on DUIs and so forth. Could we do more? Probably, but not enough to where it's a sizable change, right? Same thing with anti-texting. We have the anti-texting law. Unless you're going to do something drastic, like ban the ability to use cell phones in cars completely, meaning that they can't be seen at all. Some countries do that. That's a dramatic change, but still, no one's really advocating for that. You have to choose a subject that there's debate, that there's people advocating about, and so forth. A good example of this is gay marriage. Years ago, you could have been pro-gay marriage or anti-gay marriage. Either way, that both sides could have done this speech. But now, because of the Supreme Court and then also law passed by the Congress under the Biden administration, gay marriage at this time is protected. So the only people who can do the speech, because it's the only change part of it, is the anti-gay marriage people. See how that works? Abortion, both sides can do it, right? Both sides can do it. There are states who have banned, states that have it protected, right? And I'm one of the few professors that allow abortion speeches. We have tons of possibilities. all the different types of pollution speeches available. We have students this semester, a lot of students are doing AI, and they're doing AIs, and AI is such a huge issue. You can do it in lots of different ways, right? You can do one student is doing the environmental issue with AI, another student is doing the copyright, intellectual property, and another student is doing the effects on education with AI. So lots of ways to do it. And that's another thing I can tell you. If you're having problems doing, there's tons of issue. We had pro and anti gentrification speeches in my classrooms over the years. Fun fact: all the pro gentrification people were Latinos, and I mean Latinos, Latin males. You know, I use the generic all the time, so Latinos. I don't know. I just always found that fascinating. Um, and there's lots of potentials right now, right? Anti gerrymandering speech is very relevant right now. Lots of stuff on that. You can't be pro gerrymandering because it's allowed, obviously, across the nation and so forth. So see, you can look at the news and so forth. Another thing you can do, and this is a controversial thing I said, if you're thinking about topics, is you can look at something, and this is what it's controversial. There's something that are not actually problems that we talk about all the time. They're not problems. They're symptoms of problems. So if you're talking about homelessness, it's not a problem. What's going on with the US border? Not a problem. Donald Trump, not a problem, right? Don't take that out of context. The reason why I mention that is this is a symptom of so many different problems, right? So for homelessness, right there, uh, think about what causes homelessness, right? The housing issue, mental health, healthcare, um, drugs, right? Lots of different things that create the homeless issue. So the homelessness is a symptom of so many different problems. You could take one of those problems and do a speech on it. The border. The border is actually not the problem. The problem is what causes people to come up. You could do, if you were doing something about stopping people from taking jobs in the United States, crackdown on immigration has been, there's no changes there. But going after the employers, that has been done a little bit in this country, but that would be something. Or a lot of the countries that are affected are caused by stuff that we've done. So you could do an anti-coup. Like it's illegal in the United States to support coups, over democracies. You can do what are some of the other countries that are problematic? Of course, cartel speeches are banned, just like last time. But there's so many things, right? The gun control, because a lot of the guns, about 75% of the guns that go into Mexico cartels come from the United States. Lots of issues, right? Free drug rehab, because a lot of the drugs that come over is because the market is so good in the United States, right? Um, Lots of different things. And then finally, Donald Trump, like or dislike him, there's a lot of potential speeches there. You do ban a constitutional amendment eliminating the electoral college. You do banning campaign contributions, dark money, a law that felons can't run for office, the law requiring tax return. I mean, there's so many different laws that you can put in that would affect our current political environment and do what we call reforms, right? So lots of different things that you can do. So if you see something, an issue, a lot of times there's a part of it and you can focus on that part. All right. So topical issue, something, let's go back to the slide. Topical issue, something large scale, recommend macro subject. That's what I mean by that. There are times students have wanted to do speeches and I told them to do a research check and they come back and they're like, they can't do it because there's no research. I had a student who wanted to do a reform on stop signs. And there wasn't dramatic change, but I told the student to do a research check, and the student came back and they're like, there's nothing there. So again, something large scale that there's actual change, and if there's debate, there's going to be research there. Ad space available. There used to be a PowerPoint requirement. There is no PowerPoint requirement. That was only for the second speech. So no PowerPoint requirement. 5 references. The second speech had 3 references. Technically, the first one had a reference, but that was you. The second speech had 3. Now you have 5. Odd numbers. Anyways, APA like last time. So on your outline, no in-text citation, reference page, APA. And then you do your references, not on your, well, we don't have slides, but you do it in your speech, according to New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, and then you say your fact. All right. 5 times. Recommend business casual. That's from my days in Cal State LA. I just have it on there because I'm lazy and I want to take it off. Same evaluation, same as last time. One student, questions are different, but same kind of setup. Choose the magic number on that one. Outline, same as last time. Now it's 5 references. That's it. All right. Any questions? Message me through Canvas. All right. Oh, here we go. Your first participation in your reply. And I highly recommend do both. It helps me, it helps you. Put both replies in one, both your answers in one reply. That's what I meant to say. Your first one, choose a topic for or against something. All right. Again, it has to be a change. All right. It can't be more of the same. Right. And you might sit there and go, well, there's all this littering. I'm anti-littering. Guess what? There are so many laws. There's nothing plausible. And that's the thing that we're going to cover in a second. But make sure you choose something that it's a change. All right. Here's a problem. Here's my solution. All right. So before I continue, real quick, what I mean by change, and make sure the change is plausible. So when I teach persuasion, when I also teach it in argumentation, which by the way, I'm teaching in the fall, Tuesdays and Thursdays during the day, main campus, intercultural, teaching in the fall as well. Tuesdays and Thursdays, main campus. Free textbook in that class. Anyways, it has to be plausible to be credible. And that's one of the things about credibility. Credibility is super important. We're going to talk about it in a second. But credibility is super important. I'm going to move up the slides. Oops. To make sure I get into the right slide. I want to talk with you about. Oops, there's that little thing again. Anyways. Credibility is super important in this thing. And one of the ways to be credible is that your solution is plausible. So what do I mean by plausible? So what if I told you right now that we can eliminate 5 to 10% of the bad air in Los Angeles, like that? Los Angeles historically had the worst air in the United States. We're usually not the first anymore. Fun fact, at one point it was between 2 cities back and forth for first. One was Los Angeles, the other one, my home city of Fresno, California. So I can't get away from bad air. Houston's pretty bad now because of the regulations. LA's better. But there is a way, 5-10% of the bad air gone like that. That sound like a good idea? And it's such a revolutionary change. And it's an easy change. Just pass a law. One law in LA County, like that. Not only would it be about 5 to 10% of bad air gone like that, over time, we're talking 15-20% or more of the bad air gone. So what is it? What is this revolutionary change? Sounds good, right? Here it is. Ban drive-through windows. That's it. When you're sitting in a drive-through window going to Taco Bell or In and Out, your car is idling. Even with the in-off options that they have now in cars, your cars are still idling. Even with all the electric vehicles we have now, cars are overwhelmingly gas. They're idling. They're putting stuff into the air, pollution into the air. And if we ban drive-through windows tomorrow in LA County, it would have a sizable difference. Now, do you think we can ban drive-through windows in Los Angeles, the place that actually truly created the drive-through window? No, not at all. Not at all. I should say maybe we didn't create it, but we definitely popularized it. Anyways, we can't. There's no way that would ever pass. No way the county supervisors would ever do that. So if that was your solution, even if you had the best setup possible, the best setup possible, which by the way, I gotta remember, I gotta grab something. Even if you have the best setup possible, it's not gonna work because everyone knows that will never happen in Los Angeles. So make sure your solution is credible. We'll go on to that as we're going through the slides today. I'm gonna make sure I see what time we started. Let's go over it. Chapter 23, the first chapter in this new section that we're covering. Oh, it's difficult to read. Persuasion. Persuasion. It's not on the test, but you need to know it anytime. Well, it's on the test, but in a different way. I'll explain it in a second. Persuasion, the definition is not on the test, but persuasion, anytime you're trying to change anyone's attitude, beliefs, values, and or their behavior. That's it. Anytime you're trying to change someone's mind or behavior, that's the simplest definition. You are persuading somebody. You're telling someone they should go try a new restaurant, persuasion. You're telling somebody that this shortcut is the best, persuasion. You're telling somebody that they have that's a nice look on them, and i.e., they should probably wear it more often. That's persuasion. Anytime you are giving out judgmental or persuasive language, it is a persuasion. All right. And even if your persuasion is not intended, the judgmental language is there. It's a persuasion. So anytime you affect somebody's mind or their behavior with your words and your nonverbals too, it is persuasion. And so that's important to remember because here's what's on the test. There are three general purposes: persuasion, informative, entertainment. Out of the three I teach you, because there's only three in public speaking, persuasion is the most dangerous of the three. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Persuasion is the most dangerous of the three. Anytime that you are trying to change a mind or someone's behavior, you're trying to take power in a way, right? Or use your power. And that's what they call it, the power of persuasion. So if you're aware that you're in that, when you're in that mode, you have that kind of attempted control or influence, that it can be very dangerous. Think about all the people who've done really horrible things in our society. Someone probably persuaded them at some point or another on that path of downfall, right? Persuasion really gets people to do bad things. That's why it's the most dangerous form of speech. And chapter 23, which is about persuasion, we'll cover that. Attitude, beliefs, values, they were from the earlier. They're here again. Remember, I used the Taco Bell example. Like, dislike Taco Bell, that's attitude. Belief, whether you believe it's true or false Mexican food, that's belief. And value, if it's right or wrong, good or bad. When there's weight to something, that's a value, right? Take the abortion, right? If I made a statement to test your attitude, abortion is something that should be abortion is something that is should be legal in the United States, like or dislike. You like that statement, that's your attitude towards abortion. If you believe, if you make this thing and saying that abortion is a viable healthcare option in U.S. for U.S. medicine, whether you believe that is a true or false statement, that is a belief, right? And that's important to note because abortion is not just ending the pregnancy; it's also treatment for miscarriages and so forth. So that's the belief. But whether it's right or wrong, right? Whether it's good or bad, the effects of our society, that is value. And that's where the debate really lies. Because you can get technical with the beliefs about it being a medical procedure, right? And then like or dislike abortion. There are people who are pro-choice who don't like the procedure, but the value, if it's right or wrong for our society, or if it's good or bad for our society, that's where the debate is. That's why value out of the three has the most. And when you're talking about changing somebody's mind, most of the time it's the value part because that's where you know, that's where people get radicalized or they're cemented in their belief, their attitude of belief. It's the value that really does it. Okay, it's important to note that. Of course, behavior is not a term on here, but of course, behavior is so forth. The one thing about persuasion, and then we'll move on to the thing is the very first persuasion, the basic persuasion, and you're going to hear this throughout this time in the class, is asking someone out on a date. Because the very first persuasion of humans is finding a mate. It might have had to deal with, using a club to get somebody into the cave. But the fact of the matter is, it's the first persuasion. Asking someone out on a date is the most basic form of persuasion. And you are essentially doing both, right? Changing mind, changing behavior. Because in that moment, that person might have not had that kind of idea of you. But because you came up to them and you did what you did, you might change your mind on how they see you. And no matter what, you change their behavior because either A, they go out with you. That's a change of behavior because they weren't going out with you before. Or B, they're going to do everything possible to avoid you from now on because they'd say no. Right? That is the most basic persuasion. So you're going to hear that example a lot throughout the time. And it's also, again, the best way to remember this stuff is to connect it to yourself in some way or another. Now we're going to go into terms and theories. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Ethos, logos, pathos. You probably have heard these in other classes. English uses it. Philosophy definitely uses it. And then psychology sometimes uses it as well. But ethos, logos, pathos, we're talking Aristotle here. It's pretty easy to remember if you use my terms to remember them. First off, it's ethos. Ethos, just think about an English word that you think of first when it pops in your head, and you will always remember it, and that is, of course, ethics. So ethos equals ethics. That's the best way to remember it. Ethos equals ethics. So we're thinking of morality and ethics and so forth, those types of things. That is ethos when it comes to persuasion. What is your ethics? What is your morality and so forth? Your beliefs and stuff like that. Logic, again, what is the first English word? I accidentally said it. But what's the first English word when you hear logos? Logic, because I ruined the thing. But logos equals logic. And that's what it is. When it's persuasion, what is your reasoning, right? What is the thought process? What is the logic that you use in your persuasion? That is logos, right? That's the easy one to remember. Logos equals logic. Now, pathos is different. Before I get into the definition, what word, and if you know the definition, wipe it from your mind for a second. What English word pops in your head when you hear the word pathos, right? And the answer is Don't go long on it. It's actually basic, and it's actually in pathos. And that is, of course, path. Path is the word that pops in your head when you hear pathos. The best way to remember the definition of pathos is the emotional path you take in your persuasion. Pathos equals emotional path. That's the best way to remember it. Pathos equals emotional path. Your feelings, your emotions, that is pathos. Pathos equals path, or in this case, emotional path, that in your persuasion. We'll talk about it, how it works a little bit later. Let's go over ELM of persuasion. Don't worry, I'll never ask you to know what ELM is. It's elaboration likelihood model. It could be something else. I don't care. It's ELM of persuasion. That's what it is. And what somebody did some time ago was take Aristotle's ethos, logos, and pathos and streamlined it. Right? They streamlined it. You use elaboration, which is important because that's how we speak. In my public speaking classes, we do extemporaneous speaking. We have our notes and we elaborate from it. Same thing with the persuasion. You have an idea, a path, a route that you're going to take, and you elaborate in the path, route you want to take. There's two routes that you take. Again, hint, hint, nudge, nudge on these. One is direct persuasion route. When you use your evidence, right? When you use your reasoning and your logic. This is where the ethos and logos comes in, but don't get it confused. It's not in there. It's your evidence, it's your reason, your logic. That's direct persuasion route. If I'm talking about homelessness, for example, and I'm trying to convince people to see my way about homelessness, I would talk about the numbers. Like one of the most fascinating numbers about Los Angeles homelessness is that like between 60 to 70. I think it was above 70 at some point. I think it's around 70, maybe a little bit below. But 70 something percent of the homeless is out on the street. In the LA County, LA homeless, you're talking, or I think LA's, I don't know. Don't ask me the technical stuff, but is homeless on the street. And the other percentage is like people in their cars, people on couches, people in shelters, right? When you're looking at New York City, it's about 30 to 40%, right? That means 30, 40% are out in the street in New York City, and the rest are in like shelters, couches, cars, and so forth, or probably not on the street, but in subway system, stuff like that, right? That is the difference there, right? That is the difference there. That's the evidence part. That's the direct persuasion route. A fun fact about those numbers I said right now. When you think about red state, blue states are more like New York City, and red states are more like LA City when it comes to the percentages, from what I've seen, and by the numbers. Direct persuasion route is when you use the numbers, right? Indirect persuasion route is when you go after the emotions. So the direct route is like, I'm going to go at you with the numbers and just hit you over the head with the numbers. The indirect route is kind of like, want you to get that feeling, that emotional impact, where you're not talking about the percentage of people, the amount of people homeless. You're saying, you ever notice when you drive by those RV along the side of the road, and there's usually a bunch of them together along the road of homeless, and you drive on by, and then you notice a tricycle and some toys out front, and you realize that in that RV is a homeless child. That's an indirect route. You're going after their feelings, you're going after their emotions. This is essentially, you're trying to bring them along. You're putting, a direct route, you're grabbing them by the collar and like, let's go. Here's the numbers. Let's show this. And an indirect route is you're putting your arm around them. Like, look at over here. Look at what we see over here. How do you feel about that? That's the difference. That's the best way to sum it up. A motivation is actually something else, but a motivation is the hint, hint, nudge, nudge on it is that inner desire. It's the goals that you have inside of you that pushes you to make decisions and so forth. It has to deal with one of the big theories. All right. So how does persuasion work? By the way, if you have questions, you know what to do. Um, you wait till we have class, or you can message me through Canvas. How persuasion works? The way persuasion works is pretty simple. You use it to change people's minds or change their behavior, right? And when you're changing views or actions, and again, asking someone out on a date is an example of both. You, the end part, you are asserting some kind of influence, some kind of power, and that's why it makes it nudge nudge the most dangerous form of the three general purposes persuasion, because that's what you're doing. You're trying to change their mind. When you're doing your informative speech, and your first and second speech were informative, and anytime you weren't telling people you need to go out and follow my career path. You didn't go out there and say you need to do my hobby or enjoy my music. You were just telling them about not your music, but this type of music, this type of hobby. Um, you were just informing them about something, right? Here you're trying to get them to do something, right? Either change their mind or action. We're focused on behavior, which is a societal change, right? And that is why just think about the issues that we've had over the years and over your lifetime, conflicts and so forth, how we handled COVID, how we handle recessions and so forth. Sometimes people persuaded people to take certain paths, good or bad. Persuasion was there. And so that's important to understand what it does. It's easy to remember what it does when you put it on the simple term, asking someone on a date, convincing your friends to go to see a certain movie, stuff like that. But in the large scale, it's very important in our society to understand persuasion. Aristotle believed that if you had good ethos, good logos, good pathos, you were a complete persuader. Somebody who is incomplete, the versus part, the conflict part, is somebody who was missing or misusing one of those three or all three of those parts, right? So I always ask my students this, and this is the best way to remember it. By the way, I have Lego figures over here. So if something pops up, you know why. I always like, by the way, I've always liked doing this with the Zoom calls with the Lego figures. So we're going to have them walking across the screen. All right. Anyways, so I'm lightening the thing because we're going to get into something serious. So the best way to understand an incomplete persuader is think about somebody in your life, a friend, a family member, maybe yourself, right? Who has dated or is dating or in a relationship with somebody they probably shouldn't be in a relationship with. That's because that person, the person you think is the bad one in the relationship, is probably an incomplete persuader, right? They're misusing one of those three. Like for example, that you're the person, the example, the bad person in the relationship, they cheat, they lie, they have no ethos, or they have bad ethos, right? They're an incomplete, but they say things like, "Oh baby, baby," right? Take me, she didn't mean anything to me. I've changed, right? And so forth. Logos, right? They keep breaking up and getting back together, breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. This is the illogical part in the relationship. But they're like, oh, but baby, 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 opposites attract. Oh, we can work it out. We can figure things out, right? They had no logos, or they misused logos, and of course, pathos, the emotional path, right? When they stress, and they stress on the love part, right? It's like, oh, we're having all these issues, all these problems, but baby, when you're the one, you're the one. There's nobody else, right? The good example of this is somebody who gets together with somebody and all of a sudden they're in love instantly. Oh, we're already talking about marriage, and you're like, it's been a week. What's going on? It's because one of them is probably going to, babe, I've never felt like this before anywhere, baby, right? That is the misuse of pathos, the emotional path. And you're sitting there, so why should we know about this? Because it sounds like incomplete persuaders work. Because Aristotle was like the best way to be a persuader, use persuasion, is to be complete. And it is true. You're most likely to be successful. And more importantly, the change you're trying to do is usually longer lasting or will last, period. A complete persuader in a relationship, an honest, good relationship, right? We're talking those people who've been together for 50 something years and it works, right? An incomplete persuader, an incomplete persuader, they're more likely to fail. They're, they're, yeah, more than likely to fail. They're more likely to, what they're doing is failing long term. So they're in a, like the relationship example, the relationship is bad, right? Even if they last that 20, 50 years, even if it's long, it's horrible, right? And what's worse is, even if they're successful and they die with their persuasion having lasted that period of time, their legacy from it will never be good. So incomplete persuasion might have success, but the success is fleeting and problematic and have repercussions for even past their shelf life. So the best way to be a persuader is be complete. Now, we need to put this on the big scale, society scale. And especially when you're talking about successful incomplete persuaders, because in society, there's been lots of people who've been successful with incomplete persuasion. So here's my question to you. All right. Um, which of those three, ethos, logos, or pathos, do incomplete persuaders lean on the most? Meaning, when they use, they're missing some of the other ones or all of the other ones, but when they use the persuasion, ethos, logos, pathos, they lean on a corrupted version of ethos or logos or pathos the most. There's one of these that they lean on the most. Which one do you think it is? Think about it in your head for a second. And the answer is pathos, the emotional path. Remember the big oh baby? Because the person who's unethical in the relationship, illogical in the relationship, or even jumps into the relationship, when they persuade them incompletely to be staying in the relationship, they'll go on the emotional part. Ooh baby, right? And that's usually pathos, right? Usually pathos. It doesn't mean it's not illogical. A person will use flawed logic. Oh, our chemistry is nothing like it. And I don't know if we could find anything else like it out there. That could be true, or they could be using logic, trying to sound logical to keep you in. But and even ethics. Oh, we're in this relationship. We did this together. We did that together. We've been in so long. We've been in each other's lives. We're married, or we spend time with our families. Stuff like that. We this is not normal for people who are in this type of longevity to turn around and change. You know, that's what society norms are and stuff like that. That's bad ethics. But in reality, pathos is the one that they lean on the most to get people to do and stay in a bad persuasion, an incomplete persuasion. And the best way to example this is the larger scale. In the last 100 years, the person who I would consider the most successful incomplete persuader, meaning that they were successful not in a good way. They were successful in putting over the worst incomplete persuasion possible in historical, the worst persuader. We'll put it that way. Um, is Hitler, Hitler, Adolf Hitler. And I know this is taking a dark turn, but the thing is that you need to know the impact of this stuff. Because I'm gonna speak from not as a professor. I'm gonna speak as somebody who has lived in Germany a couple times. Who sprechen Sie Deutsch? My Deutsch is sehr schlecht, but it's very good for an American. But I know its history. I know its people, um, and I'm half German myself. I was looking. I've seen it. The hat's covered. Let's see if I have any other German artifacts close by. Well, that's over. That's way over. I'm not gonna go over there. But anyways, I have stuff. So the reason why I mentioned this is because this is where it come from my observation. Here's the thing about Hitler and his persuasion that got Germany to do it. By the way, when I talk about this, the people who are most responsible for, of course, for Hitler and what he did are the German people, right? Society that allow horrible people to do horrible things are the ultimate people that are responsible. Um, Hitler had horrible ethics. We all know this. And by the way, I'm going to talk about it in a way that might be people might think it's a little bit off because I'm going to talk about how I'm going to put it in another perspective, but it needs to be said because we all know he was unethical, right? He, not just the Holocaust, but the oppression of his own people, waging war on countries that were not adversary, invading countries, all these horrible things. We know he was unethical. We all know that, right? And so forth. Illogical. This is something that I don't think is talked about enough about Hitler and the Nazis because they were stupid. They were dumb. They waged a and this is not undermining the unethical part. This is adding to it because a lot of times people they only focus on the really bad stuff and they don't look at this stuff over here and the bad stuff gets romanticized and I think it's one of the reasons why this stuff comes back is we don't talk about how stupid evil is and Hitler and the Nazis were stupid, right? They were illogical. They waged a war on three fronts. They oppressed their own people and created a large resistance movement inside their country. They killed off a percentage of their own population that would have been part of their effort for economics and war and all that stuff. And they had to use their own resources to do that horrible stuff. They were illogical. They were horrible, stupid. Hitler and Nazis were horrible, stupid people. And what they did was go after the German emotion. And they went after the wrong emotion. They went after anger. Because here's the thing about World War II that is not talked about enough. After World War One, the German people felt betrayed by their government. Germany surrendered and they weren't invaded. They weren't occupied. And so they really never had the repercussions of World War II. They got a big bill they had to pay. And so they felt like their government betrayed them and they were put with a giant bill that they felt betrayed and they were angry and they felt humiliated and all this stuff. In Germany, and because of things like the Rhine River and their position and the fact that they did had to spend a lot of their resources on their colonization armies and stuff like that, came back economically pretty quickly. The Rhine River is, I think, the main reason why Germany is the way it is economically. Um, I'm a little longer because I don't have students in here. I'm a little longer at this, so I apologize. Um, And so they were angry and they were upset and they were like, why, and the pride came back in and Hitler came in, the Nazis came in, and they jumped on that. The anger, the betrayal, the pride, all that stuff. And they needed enemies, right? Their political opposition was the Socialist Party. And at the time, the Socialist Party were led by two Jewish politicians. That was their main political rivals. Or there were two, there was, or the higher up, anyways. And because I've talked to historians about this, like what propaganda came first, the anti-socialist or the anti, and before you say, hey, they had it in their name, they only took the name because it was popular. Um, they were Nationalist Party. They went after them, the people of Germany, with the corrupted pathos. And I can't say that enough. Anytime there's an incomplete persuader, 9 times out of 10, they're using corrupted pathos. Hitler used corrupted pathos. He went after and he got them emotionally. And it's part of the biggest problem in our society right now. We're going to talk about it later. But pathos is the way that makes it the most dangerous form of speech. I use an extreme example with Hitler because you really need to know that just for the class, but for your own sake. Whew. Okay, let's sorry it took longer than I normally do on that, but it's just because I'm by myself, so I'm trying to think. Do I have anything? I really don't have anything. Yeah, those are DVDs. Well, they're not DVD, they're Blu-ray, but for my hoity-toity collection. All right, let's move on. Elaboration likelihood model. That is the like a streamlined version of it. I'm not going to go too much into it because it's very self-explanatory, and then also because I already covered the most important parts. You go after people directly, or and they go after people indirectly. Think about your parents. Think about your parents. When a parent said, and they bring up stuff like, "Oh, you remember when you put a dent in the car, or remember when you destroyed this, or when you did that," or they throw out the specific against you and they're arguing with you. They're going after the direct route. They're using direct examples. Like here's the evidence. Here's my logic. This is it. Here it is. They're taking you, grabbing you by the collar, and putting you right, rubbing, putting you right where you were when you made those mistakes. They're using the numbers against you when they bring up old stuff, right? The indirect persuasion route. When your parents say, "Did you ever think about what your grandfather would say if he saw you like this?" The indirect persuasion route. Oh, have you not thought about the family's name? Oh my gosh, your friends might be going to this event. I bet they didn't tell their parents, right? When they, like, what would their parents say if they knew the truth or something like that? It is going after the emotional impact, right? Going after the guilt. Because when they have the numbers against you, it doesn't really trigger emotions as much. It really pounds in the logic part, right? That's why direct is the ethos logos side of it, right? But because you got to be ethical, by the way, when you're using these persuasion routes. So actually, ethos is on both, but indirect persuasion route, that's the emotion, that's the feeling. That's when you use the guilt. Right there, you go. So we'll move on. There's a lot of stuff I know. I'm trying to keep this video under 2 hours, but I'm trying to get as much out of it as possible, especially chapter 23 because of how important it is. Well, I'm not going to probably cover all of it. Yeah, I'm going to cover all the chapter. Yeah, I'm going to end with chapter 23 and nothing more. But before we continue, I'm going to go back to persuasion. and how to set up your speech. So I have the stuff that we're going to cover next up on the screen, but we're taking a break from that and we're going to focus on this part. Actually, maybe, ooh, excuse me. Maybe I'll stop share for a while. There we go. Hi. Um, so yeah, because I don't have any students in the chat. So, because by the way, I usually try to have it on the share screen when you guys are in it because I don't memorize names up on the thing. This is on my YouTube channel. I need to fix that by next semester. Anyways, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna talk about your setup, how to do your speech. And so I have my trusty board here. And we got the, I don't use whitening on my teeth. I use like the enamel repair. Sometimes, I'm horrible writing. All right. When you get older, you have to make choices like that. Sucks. All right. So I have the MPs right here, right? Main points. And remember before, like you had, we had past, present, future for it, right? In your topical, if you do the topical one, you usually chose the three and you chose like most important down or most important at the end, you know, and so forth, right? Or simple to complex. And then no one chose it and you should never choose it for informative, but cause and effect. It's usually cause, effect. Um, and then the other one, spatial, the first place you went to, second place, and so forth. And then chronological, in the one that most students did for the history speeches, starting point, middle point, in or current point, right? Same thing if you're doing the order part. First thing you do, second thing you do, and so forth. For your speech, for problem solution, everyone's going to do the same setup. The same setup as this. Problem, solution. Now you see there's a space in these two, and then there's solution here, right? When you're doing this speech, you actually should start off with the solution. But before we do that, because I'm going to focus on the solution here, we need to set up the problem part, and it's a narrative. And the next online content thing will focus on the problem part. So here, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what I tell my students. So the first problem is the overall problem, right? The second problem is the connecting problem. I call it the connecting problem. Now, my colleagues, when they teach this speech, they go problem, cause, effect, solution. I don't do that because we also teach the cause and effect speech. So I don't like the word cause in my setup. So what I do is I explain it this way: overall problem, connecting problem, solution. So what do I mean by that? It's a great thing. Remember, your first speech was about the narrative. You set up a good narrative. You set up a good story. You lead your audience to where you want to go along. And then with the second speech, you had your narrative of informing them about something where you're adding your research and information. Now you're convincing them to go along with you on that narrative, leading them to your solution with your research along for the ride. And the best way to do that is talk about the overall problem. Take a part of that problem. Focus on, again, the connecting problem. That's the solution. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's say I had the issue of homelessness, right? Homeless. By the way, I have worked with the homeless directly in lots of different ways, but the biggest one was when I worked at the downtown library in Fresno, California. And one of the things I found out through there is one of the big hardships the homeless have, even when they're in the shelter, is a lack of address. It's a lack of address. Because if they want to sign up for government services, welfare, maybe see if they can get into some kind of rehab program or something like that, where they send them out. They usually need it. Um, and so the lack of address is a huge problem. So my main point one, the issue with homelessness on the street, shelters, all that stuff, for the whole homeless situation. Part of that problem. These folks don't have an address for like what I just said. So I took the big problem, the overall problem, I took a sliver of that problem, the lack of address, meaning they can't get government services and so forth. And that main point three, something we do in Los Angeles, and it's actually pretty good. I wish that we had more of them, is the little villages. Yeah, if you don't know, I was surprised. Um, I'm not that far from one of them. It's along the 210. I was surprised when I stumbled upon it months ago. But the fact is, these are great. The little villages are amazing because what happens is those little villages, each of the little small apartments, like huts that they have in those villages, each of them has an address, and so they get the clean, they have the support in there in the village, and then they have the address, so they start receiving government services. That is the narrative. We have an issue of drugs in this country. Fentanyl, explosion, opioid addiction, and so forth. Rehab is super expensive. Free drug rehab, right? We're going into recession. Now I'm going to even show you if you by the way, same as last time, and I said this already in class. I share my opinions. My opinions are examples, not pushing an agenda. They're examples because I want you to develop your own opinions. If you believe that you have a subject that's something I'm against, let me tell you, my students in my past would be the first to tell you that I never did any kind of judgment or did not help students who had different viewpoints than I did. I'm very much pro-choice, but my pro-life students will tell you that I created great, really good narratives for it. So I'll take a speech. I'm against tax cuts. I don't like any kind of tax cut. It's not because I'm pro like a big government person. I just think it's irresponsible, right? Opinion. See, opinion. Example. We're going into recession. We are. Sorry. Spoiler alert. We're going into recession. We're going into recession. Bad economic times up ahead. Part of the problem, the middle class, uh, studies have shown that the more money that they have to spend, the better the economy, the better the recovery. Solution, tax cut for the middle class and the working poor. And only for them. Right? By the way, this is something Republicans talk about all the time. They usually group it in with general tax cuts, but still, tax cuts. Narrative. See how that works? The big problem of bad economy, bad economic outlook, took a part of that problem and the solution. Because here's the thing: if you want to say I'm for world peace, guess what? You're not going to solve world peace. But if the main point two is most countries that go to war are not democracies and are not democracy or they're illiberal democracies like Russia, the United States, and other places like that. Main point three solution: promote democracies by banning non-democracies from the Olympics and all other major sporting events like the World Cup as well. Dun, dun, dun. See, see how this works, or in other things as well. So, democracy benefits. That's the democracy benefits speech. Very hard speech to pull off. But you get the gist. A good narrative will help you with anything. You asking someone out on a date. Overall problem. Dating sucks. Oh my God. You got to have the online profile, the hinges, the Bumble. Oh, so horrible. You know, Facebook has a dating app. Oh, my goodness. That's just horrible out there. Problem. 9.2. People are just not real on those things. They're just fake. They're not telling everything. Solution. I'm real. See how that works? It's a setup. It's a narrative. And by the way, you got to be ethical to do this. You know, if you're gonna say I'm real, and that's how it works, right? That's what you do to lead them to the solution. You talk about the overall problem. You talk about a connecting problem inside that problem that leads to your solution. That's a narrative, and that's how some big things are tackled, is by going after parts of it. So what are you going out of the parts? How do we do solutions? I told you about it being credible. Think about the situation. I'm from Fresno, California, as many of you have heard me say. And fun thing about Fresno was number one in the world on something. Now, I know what you're going to say. Was it meth? Was it car thefts? And the answer to that is yes. We've been number one on meth, and we have been number one on car thefts. I don't know about the world with car thefts, but I believe we were number one in the world on meth. Definitely in the United States on both categories, by the way. If there's something we were number one in the world on, and it was a good thing. It was a really good thing. We were number one over Los Angeles. We were number one over um, Paris, London, New York, San Francisco, Tokyo. We were number one. And that number one was recycling. Yeah, Fresno, California was number one in recycling for a couple of years, right? And so what happened was, and it's kind of weird because Fresno, fun fact about Fresno is in the red part of the California, so it's usually anti-government, more Republican, and environmental. Recycling is an environmental issue. Fresno is the lowest educated city, major city in California. We're fifth, by the way, in city size. And two, lowest income of the big cities, which is true. How did Fresno, a conservative, low education, low income city in California, lead the world in something environmental? Well, what happened was California governor, I believe it might have been a Republican. It had to be a Republican because this was before Davis, before Schwarzenegger, I think. But there was a major push on landfills, and that we had to reduce our landfill sizes across the state of California, and we're running out of space, stuff like that. And so what they did was they put these requirements, and so every city had to come up with their own solution for landfills, and a lot of them adapted recycling programs. Fresno, and I remember this because I was a kid, had these bins, and they like I think there was four bins, and you had to like separate your trash for the recycling, and there was a big thing for trash, right? The bins didn't work. The bins didn't work at all because it was confusing. People didn't want to separate their trash. We did it, but not everyone did it, and people just ended up throwing their stuff away in the big trash, and it wasn't working that well. And people in the city of Fresno were like, "How do we get people to do this? They don't want to do the work because I don't think they don't want the government telling them things, and they can't figure it out. They're low educated, and they got a lot of stuff to do because they're low income. How do we make this easier for them?" And someone said, "How about give them three big trash cans. One of them is for stuff they don't think they can recycle. Number two is the stuff they think they can recycle. They don't know. So they think they put the things they think is recyclable in there, and we'll do it for them. And then number three, we'll just do the easiest recycle to figure out, which is the green, right? The branches, the grass. So we'll put a big green trash can, we'll put a big blue one for the recyclables, and then we'll put a black or a gray for the non-recyclables. And yeah, we'll go through most of the trash anyway. So yeah, that was their solution. And it worked. It worked. And so when I tell you guys about thinking about solutions or things, because what's going to happen is when you do your research, there are going to be people who give you possible solutions. I highly recommend John Oliver. John Oliver is that comedian who has a show on HBO, Last Week Tonight. His YouTube channel has these like 20-30 minute blocks where he covers one issue, and he sets up the whole problem thing, and at the very end he comes up with solutions, right? And a lot of the solutions he'll say, here's the easy one to do, here's the hard one to do, and so forth. And by the way, this is how I was even before he started doing that. And so when you're thinking about solutions, like the Fresno example I gave, they thought about like, hey, what would work and whatever. So when you're looking through possible solution for whatever problem you want to do, think about the one that would most likely work, and you're going to find out by choosing the like plausible. Remember plausible, and a solution that sounds like it would work with the people in mind. You're talking um, you're talking a very, very credible speech, right? We'll talk about, and then by the way, the one last thing I'll say about the solution, right? Find something that's credible, plausible, something that would sounds like it will work. And another way to make it sound credible is uh, we don't believe in awareness in this class. Awareness does not work. If you don't know what awareness is when people have commercials and they say, oh yeah, don't litter. How much littering do you see on your way to school? Right? Awareness does nothing. In fact, this is one of the only times I'm going to cuss in class. So apologies ahead of time. Awareness does jack shit. Does nothing. Does nothing. So if your solution is, hey everybody, let's all vote. How are you going to get people to vote? By the way, mandatory voting is one of the speeches people do, and that's anyways. Um, that's a thing. But if your awareness is like your solution is we're gonna have a commercial campaign, it will never works. Only time it works is if it's something taboo, and even then, that's probably not a speech you're gonna do, anyways. So I'll give you the example. I'm not gonna do the example of the taboo thing on the video. I'll do that in class if anyone wants to hear it. But the thing is, find something, and it's simple. Pass a law, federal, state, and so forth, right? Um, or pass a budget, or take money away from something, whatever. But you have to have something that sounds plausible, right? Something that actually makes changes. Passing a law, either the federal, state, or local level is one way. If you want to make college free, federal law saying requiring all states to go to a zero tuition solution for community college, 5% for state college, and the upper echelon 10% of tuition of individual costs, right? The way it used to be, by the way, before Ronald Reagan became governor in the state of California. College used to be free, pretty much in this country. It's free in most other countries, except for Ohio. You can do the same speech and you can just say college is free in the state of California. Community college is free in the state of California, 5%. So it could be a state thing, right? There's lots of possibilities there. All right. But you need to have what they call an agency. someone who actually do it sound credible. You can't just say, "Well, I hope this happens." By the way, one of the things that people think of when the speech, and I want to nip it in the bud right now, you cannot do a speech telling people how to change their lives. This is not you talking about, like, if you want to talk about the obesity epidemic, the solution isn't telling people how to live their lives. A good example of this, I think I'm going to actually end the video with this part, and this will be the last participation. I'll finish this slide and start with the next chapter in next week's content. But the Maha movement run by JFK Jr., which I'm going to say this right now, not a good man. Not a good man. Never been a good man. Never. I remember when I first was introduced him, it was on Air America radio station. Then I looked into him and I found out about his second wife. No. And it's not just his anti-vax stuff and all this stuff. There's lots of other things as well. But anyways, the Maha movement is the Make America Healthy Again, folks. And they have a lot of things that are wrong, right? Again, my opinion, my example, but here's the thing. There are things that I agree with the Maha movement. There is. So like they're anti-vax. There's a lot of anti-science that they're into, which I'm 100% against. But they're about healthier living. Sounds good. They talk about getting rid of certain kinds of preservatives in our food and so forth. Great. I'm an advocate against high fructose corn syrup, for example, and stuff like that, right? And so the reason why I bring them up is they're a good example of credibility, right? Because let's say you have myself who wants healthier living too, anti fructose corn syrup, would like less preservatives in food, make healthy food cheaper, right? And they talk about their healthy living stuff. The Maha movement, for the most part, and RFK Jr. is secretary of, the cabinet secretary in the Trump administration, Health and Human Services. For the most part, he just advocates for lifestyle changes, awareness. He hasn't asked for certain laws to be done. He just changed and says, like, he changed the food pyramids, put it on the side, talks about healthy living, he shoots videos working out with Kid Rock, has press conferences, makes speeches, and that's it. Does podcasts, and that's it. People like myself are, and this is a speech that students have done, ban the corn subsidy that has created the high fructose corn syrup industry. That's the reason why we have high fructose corn syrup, is because of the corn subsidy that we passed decades ago. What's another thing? Bring the regulations of food in other countries that have healthier standards over the United States. That's a law change. That's actual doing something. That's agency. That's using an agency to change something. What else? So you can see it right there. And then also give subsidies and so take away some of the tax benefits for people who are, how we have a sin tax on alcohol and so forth. You can make a obesity tax on things with high preservatives and so forth. So there's lots of different ways to actually change laws or change budgets and so forth that's credible. Because if you just say, "Hey guys, why don't we all get together and hug and the world be a better place," no one's going to believe that. But if you say the federal government needs to pass this law, that is something that is an action. Right? It would be a change. All right, your last participation. I'm kind of tired of making videos. All right. No, I just reason now how much time we have left in the semester. Here it is. So you need to start with your narrative, because we're going to actually do this twice in this class, but this one is all three, right? Remember, problem, solution. And I taught you with the second speech, the keyword outline, right? You have your topic up here, and then you have one word to sum up what main point one is, main point two there, and so forth. And then you can expand the keyword outline to your subpoints and stuff like that. But what I want you to do, so your first participation was your topic, you're for or against something, right? What are your three keywords? Main point one, main point two, main point three. And then make sure this one right here is the overall problem, right? Homelessness, plastic pollution, bad economics, or I would say recession, one word, recession, so forth, right? And the second one, the connecting problem, addresses for the homeless and little village one, or um, for the plastic speech, garbage, because I'll give you the plastic speech real quick. Plastic in the water, microplastics affecting our food supply and getting to us. 8.2, the amount of plastic products, the disposable plastic products. 8.3, government regulations on the use of disposable plastics. That's speech. So you would do keyword plastic, 2, disposable, 3, regulation. So that's your second participation for 10 points. So your first and second are five points each, 10 points total. For it again something, scientific topic, and then second one, the 3 keywords for your main point 1, main point 2, main point 3. Let me start seeing your narrative. All right, I think that's it. Solution, agency, I covered all that stuff. We'll cover the rest of this chapter on the next online content and start the next chapter, and then we'll wrap everything up when we're in person for the final. And we'll do fun participation as well. All right, there you go. Now you know what to work on. What is that? Stop recording. All right, have a good one.